Tonight for our bonus sermon, I wanted to tell the story of Abimelech. It's not probably one of those critical stories that everyone memorizes at some point. You may have never heard the story of Abimelech, but it comprises all 57 verses of the ninth chapter of Judges. And it's funny because it has one of the Old Testament's only parables in it, and itself is kind of a parable about leadership and government and how that works out. And it's such a fascinating story. I wanted to say a few words about it. What I'm going to do is mostly kind of read through it. If you have your Bible open, Judges chapter 9, I'll read there in just a second. And I'll kind of read a bit, paraphrase, read a bit, paraphrase, and we'll just work our way through the story and just kind of take it for what it is. The lead up to the story is the end of the story of Gideon. Gideon, at the end of chapter 8, the people want to make him king. And Gideon says, no, we follow God, we don't need a king, which is one of the themes throughout both the book of Judges and the early part of 1 Samuel, where the people just keep saying, yeah, we really want a king. Well, Gideon says, no, I won't do it. But after he passes, the people celebrate him in a bigger than good way. So, for example, Gideon had made an ephod to worship God, and the people turn it into like an idol. Gideon had sons, and people start to treat them as if they were princes. And so the legacy of Gideon is kind of tragic, that his faithfulness at the end of his life leads people to kind of hero worship him in a way that was unhealthy. So that leads to the situation in chapter 9 then. Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, went to Shechem to his mother's relatives and said to them, to the whole clan of his mother's family, say in the ears of all the leaders of Shechem, which is better for you, that all 70 of the sons of Jerubbaal rule over you, or that one rule over you? Remember also that I am bone of your bone and your flesh. Jerubbaal, remember, is the other name for Gideon. Gideon had knocked over the statue to Baal, and so they call him the Baal Smasher. He's Jerubbaal. So Abimelech is one of these sons, and he has a very simple plan. He says, right now, there's like 70 sons, and they're all in charge. Wouldn't it be better if it was one son, and if he was kind of related to you? So the men of Shechem, who are Abimelech's mother's family, right, other set of in-laws, thought this is a great idea. We can push out all the other sons of Gideon, elevate Abimelech, and then we'll kind of have him as a puppet. Anytime he is our brother justifies murder is never a good idea, right? Something has gone horribly wrong already. But wicked people are always available for the right price. And so it says, and his mother's relatives spoke all these words on his behalf in the ears of all the leaders of Shechem, and their hearts inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, he is our brother. And they gave him 70 pieces of silver out of the house of Baal-Berit, with which Abimelech hired worthless and reckless fellows who followed him. So a fairly worthless and reckless fellow hires some more worthless and reckless fellows. And they do exactly what the plan said. Verse 5 and 6, he went to his father's house at Ophrah, not to be confused with Ophrah, and killed his brothers, the son of Jerubbaal, 70 men on one stone. So like ritualistic murder, pretty terrible. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left, for he hid himself. And all the leaders of Shechem came together, and all Beth Millo, and they went and made Abimelech king by the oak of the pillar at Shechem. So they kill all the other sons of Gideon, Jerubbaal, except for Abimelech, who they make king, and Jotham, who escapes. Good thing to learn here, if your kingdom is built on murder, nothing good can possibly come of that. And that's the stories that follow. So in verse 7 and following, Jotham, the one son that escapes, says, let me tell you a little parable that you should learn from. And again, it's one of the Old Testament's only parables. They're so familiar to us from Jesus. This one's kind of funny. It sounds a little bit like a Tolkien story that should be in Lord of the Rings somewhere. It's really fun. And when it was told to Jotham, he went and stood on top of Mount Gerizim and cried aloud and said to them, listen to me, you leaders of Shechem, that God may listen to you. The trees once sent out to anoint a king over them, and they said to the olive tree, reign over us. The olive tree said to them, shall I leave my abundance by which gods and men are honored and go hold sway over the trees? And the tree said to the fig tree, you come and reign over us. But the fig tree said to them, shall I leave my sweetness and my good fruit and go hold sway over the trees? And the tree said to the vine, you come and reign over us. But the vine said to them, shall I leave my wine that cheers God and men and go hold sway over the trees? Then all the trees said to the bramble, you come and reign over us. And the bramble said to the trees, if in good faith you are anointing me king over you, then come and take refuge in my shade. But if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. So what's the story? Weird story. You got talking trees, right? And the trees want to make a king. And who do you start with? Like the best tree. Obviously, the olive tree. He's the best tree. And so they want him to be king. But the olive tree is busy being an olive tree. He's good at it. He's got more important things to do. So he says no. And then they move down kind of the order of greatness. And all the trees, all the way down to the vine, says, no, I've got better things to do. Who doesn't have anything better to do? The bramble, the thorn bush, the thing you cut away to make room for other things. He says, yeah, I'll be your king. I got all kinds of time. But he has a statement, a kind of a curse and a promise on them. He says, if you will in good conscience stand under my shade, then good. If not, the fire for you. So he's threatening them as he accepts the kingship. And first he says, if you'll stand under my shade. Have you ever tried to find shade under like a thorn bush? It's not really what they're there for. So even that is a joke. If you will set yourself down in the mighty shade of this thorn bush, then that'll be great. If not, what's the other thing thorn bushes are good for? They burn well, he says. If not, I'm burning this place down. Okay, so that's Jotham's story. And of course he's talking about what has just happened. Gideon had said, no, I won't be your king. And his sons had kind of taken some leadership apparently. But who they actually end up making king is the lousiest person of all. So in verse 16, now therefore, if you acted in good faith and integrity when you made Abimelech king, and if you have dealt well with Jerubbaal and his house and have done to him as his deeds deserved, for my father fought for you and risked his life and delivered you from the hand of Midian, and you have risen up against my father's house this day, and have killed his son, 70 men on one stone, and made Abimelech, the son of his female servant, king over the leaders of Shechem, because he is your relative. If you have been acted in good faith and integrity with Jerubbaal and with his house this day, then rejoice in Abimelech, and let him also rejoice in you. But let fire come out from Abimelech and devour the leaders of Shechem at Beth-Milo, and let fire come out from the leaders of Shechem and from Beth-Milo and devour Abimelech. And then Jotham ran away and fled and went to Beer and lived there because of Abimelech, his brother. So what's the message? If you can in good conscience say, we did right, this was a great idea. We treated the descendants of Gideon, who saved all of our lives, very fairly by murdering them all. And Abimelech, who arranged for the murder of his brothers, is a really good guy. He's the guy we want to lead us. He said, if you can say that in good conscience, and you can't, he says that, God bless you, enjoy that. If not, you get everything that's coming to you and you deserve it. And so if you live by sin, you pay the price of sin. And then he runs off because he knows what's about to happen, which of course is what's about to happen. It turns out people who kill others to make you king are just as likely to kill you. So verse 22 says, Abimelech ruled over Israel 3 years. This is kind of important, actually. In the Old Testament, good kings get long reigns. David reigns 40 years. Solomon reigns 40 years. Abimelech reigns 3 years. Okay. And God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the leaders of Shechem, and the leaders of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech, that the violence done to the 70 sons of Jerubbaal might come, and their blood be laid on Abimelech, their brother, who killed them, and on the men of Shechem, who strengthened his hands to kill his brothers. And the leaders of Shechem put men in ambush against him on the mountaintops, and they robbed all who passed by them along that way, and it was told to Abimelech. Okay, so God says, we're not going to allow this to stand. An evil spirit comes, which is itself a fun conversation. The same thing happens to King Saul when he's having trouble with David. An evil spirit falls on him. He kind of starts to lose his mind, and that seems to be what's going on here. People get paranoid and suspicious, and it turns out, if you got your place by killing 70 people, you might be a little paranoid for good reason. And so the same people that he hired or that he conspired with to get rid of his brothers are now conspiring to get rid of him. Imagine that. So what's the plan? Well, the leaders of Shechem are going to create an ambush, and Gaal, the son of Ebed, moved into Shechem with his relatives, and the leaders of Shechem put confidence in him. And they went out to the field and gathered the grapes from the vineyards and trod them and held a festival. And they went to the house of their God and ate and drank and reviled Abimelech. This is a fun story to me. So they have this great plan of how to kill Abimelech. The wicked men pay wicked thugs to kill a wicked king. The wicked thugs paid to kill the wicked king do wicked things, which alerts the wicked king. And so they throw a party. Like the job's not even done yet, right? We haven't killed Abimelech, but we go and steal his grapes, have some wine, and we get totally drunk the night before, because nothing says good battle tactics like being totally drunk. So they throw a huge party and talk about how they're going to kill Abimelech. You might compare this again, if we're making a Saul and David comparison. David, who honored and respected Saul all the days of his life, even though they were at war. These men have no respect for Abimelech because he's not worthy of respect. But they get totally drunk and they have this wild party and trash him and say awful things. If you want to hear what smack talk sounds like in the age of Judges, you can read verses 28 and 29. So in verse 30, the story continues. When Zubal, the ruler of the city, heard the words of Gaal, the son of Ebed, his anger was kindled, and he sent messengers to Abimelech secretly, saying, Behold, Gaal, the son of Ebed, and his relatives have come to Shechem, and they are stirring up the city against you. Now therefore, go by night, you and the people who are with you, and set an ambush in the field. Then in the morning, as soon as the sun is up, rise early and rush upon the city, and when he and the people are with you, come out against you, you may do to them as your hand finds to do. Okay, so the original conspirators planned an ambush. The guys they hired to do the ambush got riotously drunk and made everyone mad. So the guy in charge of the city says to Abimelech, they're all drunk. If you want, come in the morning. They're all going to have a hangover. You can kill all of them. Abimelech thinks this is a great idea. So in verse 34 and following, Abimelech and all the men who were with him rose up by night and set an ambush against Shechem in 4 companies. And Gaal, the son of Ebed, went out and stood in the entrance of the gate of the city. And Abimelech and the people who were with him rose with the ambush. When Gaal saw the people, he said to Zebul, Look, people are coming down from the mountains. And Zebul said to him, You mistake the shadow of the mountains for men. Again, he's got a hangover. He just looks, I don't see it. And Gaal spoke again and said, Look, people are coming down from the center of the land. One company is coming from the direction of the viner's oak. And Zebul said to him, Where's your mouth now? You who said, Who is Abimelech that we should serve him? Are not these the people whom you despised? He's like, Hey, I heard you last night at the party. You were talking all kinds of trash about Abimelech. Well, apparently there he is, so you go take care of him. Put your money where your mouth is. And, well, that goes predictably. Gaal went out at the head of the leaders of Shechem and fought with Abimelech. Abimelech chased him. He fled before him. Many fell wounded up to the entrance of the gate. And Abimelech lived at Arumah, and Zebul drove out Gaal and his relatives so they could not dwell at Shechem. So the first group of betrayers who got riotously drunk then die in the morning and are repaid in blood by the very man they had put in the throne in the first place, right? So kind of had their comeuppance. But remember what the parable had said. If in good faith you are making the Bramble king over you, then come and take refuge in my shade, but if not, fire. And we're going to get both of those before the story's finished. In verses 42 and following, what happens when you put your faith in the shadow of a bramble? On the following day, the people went out into the field, and Abimelech was told. He took his people and divided them into 3 companies and set an ambush in the field. And he looked and saw the people coming out of the city, and he rose against them and killed them. Abimelech and the company that was with him rushed forward and stood at the entrance of the gate of the city, while the 2 companies rushed upon all who were in the field and killed them. And Abimelech fought against the city all day. He captured the city and killed the people who were in it, and he razed the city and sowed it with salt. So Abimelech is a terrible person, right? One ambush after another ambush, this time about workers in a field. Anyone who tweaks his paranoid mind is going to get it. And he's just out trying to slay all the enemies. Because he's never secure in his kingdom or his kingship. Because he got it by treachery. So now he's always on the lookout for treachery. If you trust a ruthless man, you're repaid in ruthlessness. Did you expect negotiations from a man who arranged for you to kill 70 of his brothers? No, he's a terrible person, and you get what you get, and you don't get to throw a fit. So when all the leaders of the tower of Shechem heard it, they entered the stronghold of the house of Elbereth. And Abimelech was told that all the leaders of the tower of Shechem were gathered together. And Abimelech went up to the Mount Zalmon, he and all the people who were with him. And Abimelech took an axe in his hand and cut down a bundle of brushwood and took it up and laid it on his shoulder. And he said to the men with him, "What you have seen me do, hurry and do as I have done." So every one of the people cut down his bundle and followed Abimelech, put it against the stronghold, and they set the stronghold on fire over them, so that all the people of the tower of Shechem also died, about 1,000 men and women. So what's the plan? Abimelech says, "Oh, you're going to stay in this tower. I'll set the tower on fire." And what was the parable? If you don't trust in my shade, you're going to burn. And he literally burns them with brambles. One thing a bramble does well is ruin and destroy everything it touches. Then Abimelech went to Thebez and encamped against Thebez and captured it. But there was a strong tower within the city, and all the men and women and all the leaders of the city fled to it and shut themselves in, and went up to the roof of the tower. And Abimelech came to the tower and fought against it and drew near the door of the tower to burn it with fire. Because, again, if it worked one time, do it again. And a certain woman threw an upper millstone on Abimelech's head and crushed his skull. Fun ending to the story. Owen throws the rock over the side of the wall. Then he called quickly to the young man, his armor bearer, and said, "Draw your sword and kill me, lest they say of me, a woman killed him," which is a reference back to the Deborah story. And his young man thrust him through, and he died. And when the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, everyone departed to his home. And here's the last two verses. "Thus God returned the evil of Abimelech, which he committed against his father in killing his 70 brothers. And God also made all the evil of the men of Shechem return on their heads, and upon them came the curse of Jotham, the son of Jerubbaal." The end. Now, what's that story about? Is Abimelech even a judge? I mean, I don't know. He rules evil. He does defeat some bad guys. He's also one of the bad guys. I mean, it's a really difficult story to sort out. What I think we can see is that, yes, God's justice did win in the end. All the bad guys got what was coming to them. The people were spared from a terrible, treacherous leader who happened to be one they had picked. But what we also see is that seemed like the most painful way to go about it, right? And I think about that in issues of like national and world politics and so forth. Like as a Christian, no matter who wins an election, I have this confidence that God always gets his way in some ultimate sense. That like some nation couldn't cast a vote and overthrow God's purpose for the universe. That's not possible. So sometimes I'm like comforted by that God gets his way. On the other hand, the parable of the trees and the story of Abimelech reminds us, while God always gets his way, it doesn't have to be pretty. If you keep trusting in brambles instead of olive trees, if you keep putting the wrong people in positions of power, God gets his way and justice wins out, but a lot of people suffered because rotten people were in charge. And so I think the story asks us, are we smarter than the trees who were so eager for a king, they picked the worst, most rotten person among them to do it? It's a challenge. We never, ever get the leaders that we want, it feels like. There's always a struggle, a little bit of bitter taste in our mouth come election day, that it's just not the way it's supposed to be. The only comfort I get is that no matter who wins an election, Jesus is the Lord in his kingdom, and he's not a bramble, and his way is good and right. And everything else is just an approximation, and we try to live with that the best we can. Didn't mean for that to be political commentary. You can take that any way you want. I intentionally left out party names and presidential names and governor's names or whatever, because to me it's not about one or the other party or person. It's just it does seem like too often we're so eager for leadership, we will sell out our values to pick someone who will lead, regardless of whether they're the kind of leader we need. And that's maybe the struggle of being a Christian in a secular society. So there's the parable of Abimelech. Do with it as you will. Enjoy.